So you want to run an illegal casino. A back room behind an unmarked door, velvet on the tables, a stack of chips catching the light, and a rotating cast of players who showed up because someone they trusted made a call. No state license on the wall. No cameras reporting to a gaming commission. Just cash, cards, and the quiet promise that whatever happens in that room stays in that room. Here's what that fantasy leaves out. The security detail on payroll 7 nights a week. The cut that has to go to whoever controls the neighborhood before you control anything. The night a regular loses $40,000 he doesn't have and stops answering his phone. And the knock on the door that can end the entire operation, and possibly your freedom, in about 4 seconds. Running an illegal casino is not really a gambling business. It's a cash management business that happens to have a card table in the middle of it. One where your single biggest expense line is the risk of getting caught. And where the people you're really in business with are rarely the players. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly how these operations actually make money. Why so many of them get shut down within a year or two. And why the people who ran the most famous underground game in America still ended up broke and in a courtroom. Before we talk about money, we need to talk about what illegal casino actually covers, because it's not one business. It's several, wearing the same trench coat. There's the private high-stakes poker game, an invite-only room that rotates locations, the kind Molly Bloom ran in Los Angeles and New York, funded entirely by buy-ins from wealthy players. There's the storefront card parlor, a fixed location, often disguised as a social club or a business front, running mahjong or poker for a local clientele, frequently under the protection of an organized crime group that takes a piece just for allowing the doors to stay open. There's the Sweepstakes Cafe, a strip mall storefront full of slot machine-style terminals, technically legal in the eyes of its operators because of a sweepstakes loophole, and a business model that regulators across multiple U.S. states have spent the last decade trying to shut down. There's the illegal sportsbook, a bookmaking operation taking bets on games through a phone line or an app, competing directly against licensed sportsbooks but without paying a cent in tax or licensing fees. And there's the full backroom casino. Tables, dealers, the works, the rarest and most capital-intensive version, the one that requires the most infrastructure and the most protection to survive even a single year. Each of these is a completely different cost structure. This script focuses mostly on the private high-stakes game and the storefront card room, the two most common versions, while showing where the economics of the others diverge. Start with the room itself. You can't run this out of just any apartment. You need a space private enough that neighbors don't call about foot traffic at 2 a.m., but central enough that players will actually show up. In cities like New York and Los Angeles, that usually means renting a loft or a suite under a shell company, paying a premium of anywhere from 20 to 50% over market rate because the landlord either doesn't ask questions or is being paid specifically not to. Soundproofing, blacked-out windows, and a reinforced door with a peephole and an electronic lock add another $5,000 to $15,000 before a single card is dealt. Then there's staffing, and this is where the fantasy of just you and a card table falls apart fastest. A serious operation needs a doorman, who knows every face and every password, one or two professional dealers who can run a game fast enough to keep the rake flowing, and at least one person whose entire job is watching the street for anything that looks like a police vehicle. None of these people work for tips. In the world of underground high-stakes poker, professional dealers reportedly earn several $100s a night in cash just for one shift, and that's before factoring in the premium for discretion. Next comes what true crime reporting on organized crime-linked gambling has documented for decades: the protection payment. When a card room or backroom casino operates in a territory that's already controlled by an organized crime group, court records from cases across multiple U.S. cities describe operators paying a recurring cut, sometimes a flat weekly fee, sometimes a percentage of the take, simply for the privilege of being allowed to keep the doors open without interference. Skip this payment and the risk isn't just a police raid. It's a much more immediate problem walking through the front door. Equipment sounds like the cheap part, and on paper it is. A full set of casino-grade tables, chip sets, and dealing shoes might run $10,000 to $20,000. But buying that equipment leaves a paper trail, so operators frequently source it in smaller batches from multiple vendors, sometimes overseas, adding cost and delay specifically to avoid a single large purchase that could draw attention. Then there's the cost nobody puts on a spreadsheet: what to do with the cash once it's in the door. A profitable underground casino generates far more physical currency than any legitimate small business its size would ever produce. And large, unexplained cash deposits are exactly what triggers currency transaction reports at U.S. banks. So operators typically run the money through one or more legitimate-looking fronts: a bar, a car wash, a laundromat, a check-cashing storefront, paying a fee, often 5 to 15% of whatever gets laundered, just to make the money usable without immediately becoming evidence. Finally, every serious operator sets aside what amounts to a legal defense reserve. bail, retainers for a criminal defense attorney, and the assumption that at some point, someone connected to the operation gets arrested and needs to be represented quickly and quietly. Operators who've been prosecuted describe this as simply a recurring cost of doing business, budgeted the same way a legitimate company budgets for insurance. There's one more cost that rarely gets talked about: staff loyalty. Every dealer, doorman, and lookout is someone who could become a witness. Operators typically pay well above what a legitimate casino job offers specifically to buy silence. And even then, turnover is constant. New hires need to be vetted through personal referrals only, which slows down staffing and means the operation can never scale as fast as demand for seats might allow. Added up, the space, the staff, the protection payment, the equipment, the laundering fee, and the legal reserve, and a mid-sized underground poker operation in a major city can easily carry $20,000 to $40,000 a month in fixed costs before a single hand is dealt. And unlike a licensed casino, none of that spending shows up as a deductible business expense. It's simply gone, every month, whether the game runs well or not. So how does the money actually come in? The core mechanic is the same one licensed poker rooms use, just without a regulator capping it. It's called the rake, a small percentage the house takes out of every pot, typically reported in underground games at somewhere between 5 and 10%, compared to the 2 to 5% capped by law at a licensed casino. On a table running 25 hands an hour with an average pot of a few $1,000s, that rake alone can generate several $1,000s an hour for the house, multiplied across every table running that night. Then there's the buy-in. High-stakes underground games often require players to sit down with tens of thousands of dollars in cash just to get a seat, and the operator sometimes takes a placement fee simply for arranging access to a game with wealthy or high-profile players. That's reportedly one of the ways Molly Bloom's operation generated revenue beyond the rake itself, charging what amounted to a finder's fee for bringing in players other operators wanted access to. If the operation includes a bar, that's a second, quieter revenue stream. A cash-only bar inside a private game can mark up liquor well beyond what any licensed venue would charge, because the customers aren't price shopping, they're already committed to the night. But the single most profitable and most dangerous revenue stream in this entire business isn't the game itself, it's the loan. When a player runs out of chips at 3 a.m. and still wants to play, the house, or someone connected to the house, offers a short-term loan at a steep interest rate, sometimes called the VIG. Court documents and reporting on underground gambling operations describe interest structures where a borrower owes significantly more than they borrowed within just a matter of days. For a player on a losing streak, that debt compounds fast. For the operator, it can generate more profit than an entire night of rake, because the interest doesn't stop accruing just because the game ends. In the rarer, full backroom casino version, the one with roulette wheels and blackjack tables instead of just poker, the revenue model shifts again. These are house-banked games, meaning the house has a mathematical edge built into every single hand, the same edge a licensed casino relies on, except with none of the responsible gaming safeguards. It's worth noting how differently the other formats we mentioned earlier make their money. A sweepstakes cafe doesn't rely on a rake at all. It runs on the same house edge built into every slot machine, just relabeled as a sweepstakes prize to sidestep gambling law, generating a steadier but lower margin stream from dozens of small bets rather than a handful of large ones. An illegal sportsbook makes its money the same way a licensed one does, through the vigorish built into the betting line rather than the outcome of any single game, which means, unlike a poker room, its revenue barely depends on who actually wins. Stack the rake, the buy-in fees, the bar, and the lending together, and a single successful night at a mid-sized underground game can clear anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 in gross revenue. Run 4 nights a week, and the annual top line on a well-connected operation can reach into the millions. Here's the part that surprises people who think this business is about card skills. The most valuable customer in an illegal casino isn't the sharp player who wins consistently and plays clean. It's the player who loses, keeps playing anyway, and eventually needs a loan to keep going. A winning player takes money out of the room. A losing player who borrows to stay in the game generates rake on every hand he plays, and interest on every dollar he owes, sometimes long after he's stopped being able to pay it back at all. This is the same structural trick that shows up in plenty of legitimate businesses that sell entertainment on credit. The house doesn't need every player to win occasionally to keep coming back. It needs a small number of players who can't stop, and who are worth more in debt than they ever were in cash. It also explains why so many underground games last only a few months before either the money runs out or the debts turn violent. A poker room can survive a bad run of luck. It usually can't survive one player who owes $20,000 he can't pay, and decides the only way out is to talk to the police. To see how this plays out in the real world, look at the most famous underground poker operation in recent American history, the one run by Molly Bloom. Bloom started by helping organize a private poker game in Los Angeles in the mid-2000s, working for a fee as an assistant to the game's original host. When that arrangement ended, she built her own game from scratch, recruiting wealthy players, financiers, and entertainment industry figures, and structuring her income around exactly the model we just described. A cut of every pot, and, later, interest on markers she extended to players who ran short of cash mid-game. At its peak, by her own account and subsequent reporting, her Los Angeles game was generating hundreds of thousands of dollars a month for her personally. She eventually moved the operation to New York and scaled it further, reportedly clearing several $1 million over roughly 2 years running games there. Then came the part every underground operator fears most. In 2013, federal agents raided her home. The investigation had started elsewhere, as part of a broader case involving organized crime figures who, prosecutors alleged, had been using poker games including hers to launder money tied to other criminal operations. Bloom herself was not accused of fixing games or cheating players. She was charged with operating an illegal gambling business, a federal offense regardless of how honestly the games themselves were run. She pled guilty in 2017. As part of the plea, she forfeited most of what she'd made, reportedly over $1 million in cash and assets, and avoided prison time, receiving probation and a fine instead. The lesson her case makes clear: it doesn't matter whether your game is fair, whether your books are clean, or whether your players are willing, wealthy, and consenting adults. Running the game itself, without a license, is the crime. And the money you made running it can be seized as evidence of exactly that. So who actually comes out ahead in this business, long term? Almost never the person running the game night to night. That person is carrying all the operational risk: the lease, the staff, the equipment, the debt collection. For a business that can be shut down and seized in a single afternoon, the people who profit most consistently are one step removed from the table entirely. In organized crime-linked operations, that's whoever collects the protection payment. A fixed, predictable cut with none of the legal exposure of actually running the game. In the legitimate world, it's the tribal casinos and licensed card rooms that offer the same rake-based poker model countless underground operators have run for decades, except with a state license, security cameras a regulator can subpoena, and a legal structure that turns the exact same cash flow into a taxable, protected, sellable business instead of a federal case waiting to happen. But that's the real lesson buried in the economics here. The mechanics of a rake, a buy-in, and a marker on a losing player's debt work identically whether the room is licensed or not. The only variable that changes who gets to keep the money long-term is whether the operation is legal. Picture the good stretch. A well-connected operator runs a steady game 4 nights a week for a year, clears an average of $20,000 a night after costs, and walks away with roughly $4 million in gross revenue before protection payments and legal reserves eat into it. No raids, no disputes that turn violent, no informants. Now picture the realistic version. 6 months in, a losing player who owes $30,000 stops paying and starts talking to a detective in exchange for leniency on an unrelated charge. Federal agents build a case over several months, then raid the operation on a random Tuesday night. Every dollar of cash on the premises is seized as evidence. The operator, the dealers, and anyone who took a cut all face federal charges. And whatever protection had been paid for buys exactly zero protection from a federal indictment. The gap between those two outcomes isn't luck. It's how many months the operation manages to stay invisible. So does running an illegal casino make money? For a while, often yes, and sometimes a great deal of it. But the business was never really about the cards. It was about how long you could keep a cash-only, license-free operation invisible to the one regulator that actually matters here. And eventually, for almost everyone who's tried, the answer was not long enough.